Welcome back to the Blazor Server in-depth course. In this lesson, we're going to be looking at form validation, ensuring that the input where the user gives us is valid before they're even allowed to submit the data. All right, so let's go to Visual Studio. Let's create a new project, Blazor app. We'll call it Blazor app, and a solution name will be validation demo. Make sure that all the settings are correct. They should be. Hit create. And then we'll close out of the starter page. Okay, so now what we're going to do is we're going to create that models folder again. And we're going to create a new model. And this is going to be the person model still, but it'll be a little bit different. We're going to have a few properties. So first name, last name, and then we're going to have, let's have one that is age. I know it'd probably be better to capture the date, but let's just capture age. And then we're going to have one that is a Boolean. And we'll call this gave consent. So they're filling out a form and they're going to give consent in order to give this information to us. All right, something like that. Now, we want to validate this information. So for example, let's start with the age, because the age, it's pretty easy to understand. First of all, is we don't have to say required because it's always going to have a value, but it should have a range. So control dot to add the using system.componentModel.data annotation. And the range should be between, let's see, the minimum should be 1 and the maximum should be 125. And let's give an error message as well. And the error message will be, you need to enter a valid age. Okay? And actually that bottom should be 0. Because a baby is not 1 until 365 days have passed. Until then, they are less than 1, therefore they're 0. We just don't ever call a baby 0. Okay, so that's the age. And now let's look at first name. Well, first name is required. So we're going to use required. But then, you know what? Let's give it a string length. And we have maximum length. So a maximum length should be no more than, for the sake of this demo, let's do 10 characters. And then we can have a minimum length and say the minimum length is 5 characters. Again, for the sake of this demo. And then the error message equals invalid age, or I'm sorry, invalid first name length. All right, and we'll do something similar for the last name, only we'll change those values. So a max value, the minimum value should be 2. All right, and the max value should be, I think 5. So a last name is shorter for some reason. All right, and last name length. Okay, so now we're validating that, let's make this required. Now we're validating that the length is correct and it's required for first name and last name, and then that the range for the age is correct. And now let's have a validation for the Boolean, which seems like it's a little odd to have a validation, but we're going to say range type of bool. All right. And then inside here, we're going to say true, and we're going to have an error message that says you need to give consent to continue. Something like that. And what this does is says, hey, the range of this Boolean is from true to true, meaning there's no false available. Therefore, you have to be true in order to continue on with this form. You can't submit this with a false value. And let's just make sure it's required. I believe it should be, but let's just double check on that. So now we have this, this form with this model set up, or I'm sorry, this model, not the form yet, just a model, and we have some validation on it. Now let's create a form to match this. So let's go to Pages, we'll create a new page, new item. We need to have our imports. We're going to add that using blazerapp.models. Now we can do this. We can say private, and this is a person model. Person equals new person model. Let's have our private void handle on valid submit. Okay, and we'll just do something simple like let's create a string here, private string result, like so, and we'll say result equals a valid user has been created. And then we can also do this where you say person equals new person model and wipe out that form so we can start over. All right, so there's our person model. There's our, what we're going to do to validate it or handle the on-valid submit. So let's create our form. So we're going to create an edit form. And it likes when you complete this and then go back. The editor they're still working on, it is very difficult to try and format and handle C# and Razor syntax and HTML and CSS and it's just a lot of different types of languages all in one page, and trying to format them all properly is a little difficult. So that's why it's a little quirky at times, but you get to learn the quirks and get around them. So if we create an edit form and we'll say model equals, and the model is the person model. And we also want to have the on valid submit equals handle on valid submit. And now we're going to add two pieces of interesting tags at the top. Data annotation validator and validation summary. Okay, so what these are is this first one says go ahead and validate the model, make sure it's valid, and then here this validation summary says show the results of whatever is invalid. All right, and that's right at the very top. Now you can dial in and say give me the results for one particular field and then put those below each field. But we're just going to do the standard, which is to put everything at the very top, and it says, okay, here's all the problems you have with the form. All right. The cool thing is it's all handled for us. It just works. Now let's create a paragraph tag, and in here I'm going to create a label, and then in here I'm going to say first name colon. And then I'll have my input text with the bind value. and the bind value is going to be the person.firstname, right? I'm not going to worry about putting the ID in this field. I think that's fine. We can start with this. So let's create another paragraph for last name. So I'll change it to last name, and we'll change this to last name. And now we're going to create another one, and this one's going to be for age. But age is not a text, so instead of input text, what we're going to have is input number. This is going to bind to the age property. So this number binds the age property. And then finally, don't forget that we have our consent. So give consent or gave consent. We'll say give consent. And then this is going to be our gave consent. And instead of input text, we need to change this. And it's going to be an input checkbox. So let's change this to an input checkbox. Which, that was super simple. I just said input checkbox, now I have a checkbox. Let's create down here at the bottom our button. Class equals btn and btn dash primary. And we have a type equals submit. And then in here, our submit button will be called, submit's fine. I don't think we need to change what everybody knows. Okay, so there's our form. Let's make sure we also have our result at the very top. Let's do a h4 with a class equal to text dash success. And this is result, like so. So now they have that result at the very top once we've submitted the form, and it's a valid submission. So let's run this and see how it works. Make sure that we haven't forgotten any parts of the form, which is entirely possible. Whoops. Let me try that one more time, this time right in the right browser. There we go. So, user form, that's an ugly icon, but whatever. And it's an ugly form, but it works at least. Notice that if I mouse over the age, it's a number picker. If I go down one, check that out. You need to enter a valid age. A valid age is not -1. So now I can give, oops, it moves things around, which is a little frustrating, but let's do 125. It still says green around the edges, or shows green around the edges, and there is no message yet. I have to tab off it. And now it's saying, yeah, that's fine. Oh, 125 is fine. Go up one, you need to enter a valid age. All right. So 25, it still says it's still right around the edges, still has an error. I tab off it, and it's good to go. If I use the little buttons over the side, that's the equivalent of tabbing off it afterwards. First name. Let's hit submit first. First name feels required. Last name feels required. You need to give consent to continue. Notice the red X or red box around gave consent. So if I type Tim and tab out, notice the first name or invalid first name length. That's because it's only 3 and it should be at least 5. So Timothy, now it's valid. Last name, Corey, that's valid. And I need to give consent. Well, let's go ahead and do that. Now my form is ready to submit. If I submit this, a valid user has been created, and it wipes the form out. I can start over. Let's start again. Timothy, T. Nope, that's not right. Well, it's probably C anyways. And age, let's go here. Age is correct now, and I can submit. Nope. I need to have a valid last name because it's invalid right now, and I need to give consent to continue. So Corey, that would work. Corey's plural would not because it's too long. All right, so I change the right length, give consent, and now I can submit my form. So we can use the built-in validation that comes with this system.componentModel.data annotations. We can use this built-in validation to do a lot of different validation techniques, and they just get applied to our form as long as we have these two tags. You could probably get away with not putting the validation summary and just have the data annotations validator, which would mean they'd validate, but you wouldn't get those messages. So that wouldn't be as great. You'd still get the red boxes around things, but users wouldn't know why they got the box around them. And that's where your messages can be really helpful. All right. And my messages could be better. But those messages can tell the user why they didn't have a valid input. All right. And we've also seen here how, yeah, we learned input text, but now input number and input checkbox. And in fact, if we look, let's take checkbox off for a minute and go Control J. Let's actually scroll up so you can actually see it. There we go. So we have input checkbox, input date, input select, text, text area. So you have a number of different inputs you can work with. So it's really powerful how these things are able to bind very, very easily. So with this, we now have a form that's a little bit more like a real form with labels and with validation and with binding to our object, and we can validate the object before it actually submits. We only wipe it out after we have done something with that object. So this is all acting like a real form, and it was really quick to do. We just have to add these two tags. We have to add some type of validation on the top of our properties. So we had decorator properties. And that's it. That's all I have to do. OnValid submit only fires when the entire form is valid. Once it is, then this fires, and we can do things like wipe out the form and start over. All right, so that's it for this lesson. We've gone through all the basics of validation and more, and now you're ready to start testing this. Try it out, try different validation techniques, and even some of the things you learned about a little bit of expanded form capabilities with numbers and checkboxes. We'll get into more of those in the next lesson, but try your hand, figure it out, and also at the same time, make sure you're validating those objects so that you're really learning and solidifying what you've seen here. Okay? Once you've done that, come on back for the next lesson.